And we are live with another episode of the Keeg Talks. Today, the Keeg Talks Absolute DC. For those of you who are new to the Keeg or the Keeg Talks, this is the show brought to you by the Keeg, where we talk about a different topic every single week, or we try to, at least every weekend. Normally we talk about movies, normally we talk about TV shows, that sorts of things. So, look forward to the Penguin. We just did a Agatha All Along episode recently, but today we're talking about something that is very specific to comic books, which is Absolute DC, which is a new alternate universe timeline of DC Comics that have essentially just been released, and they're announcing more. And we are here to talk about what has come out, what has been announced, and where we hope it's gonna go. This is both a podcast for longtime readers, longtime DC comic fans, and also new ones. So if anyone is out there watching us live, twitch.tv/The Keeg Show or youtube.com/The Keeg Show, or maybe you're listening to the podcast wherever you get your podcast from. If you can reach out to us via our chat, feel free to ask questions. We are here to answer it because there may be first-time people that don't know what the hell is going on, but they want to get into comics, and that's kind of what this episode's about. I'm your host, Dimithri Perera, and I also brought in two awesome guests who are on Comic Talk that we do every Thursday, which is a very specific comic-dedicated podcast that we do. And I brought them on here. They're part of the Comic Talk crew. We got Brian Long, a.k.a. Captain Comic Rex. Brian, how's it going from the East Coast?
Oh, it's going just fine. How are you guys doing tonight? Excited to talk about these three pretty terrific comics.
Yeah. Because, we've been taking them week by week on Comic Talk, but they didn't come out in the same week. So we've talked about them here and there, and now we can talk about all of those and what's to come.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Drew, a.k.a. Drew Deficit. What's up, Drew?
I'm here and I'm alive. Nothing bad happened to me between Thursday and today when I last spoke to you. So
that's all we can hope for.
Right. That things don't happen badly in the interim,
Yeah.
So, that's good. We've been talking a lot about Absolute Comics. I don't know whether any episodes that Brian has been on, there's been an Absolute issue that's come out in that week.
No, I haven't been on in a minute, so I have not had a chance to discuss any of these Absolute books with you. I've just been alone with my thoughts, going slowly mad, being like, I need to talk about this large, beefy Batman with someone.
Yeah,
and I have no one to discuss it with.
So I'm gonna Sorry, what'd you say, Drew?
I was just reiterating the large, beefy Batman.
Large, beefy Batman. I want to know, Brian, I'll throw this out to Brian first. Pitch the premise of Absolute DC to any newcomers that are out there that are wondering what it's about.
Wow, great question. Well, I would say, are you familiar? This is my catty answer. Are you familiar with the new version of the Ultimate Universe? It's kind of like that. It's kind of like that a little bit. No, it is crazy to me the level of parallel thought that has clearly gone on between the new version of the Ultimate Universe at Marvel and the All-In Universe at DC. It's interesting you asked that question because the pitch that this was initially sold on kind of rolled my eyes a little bit at, because the way that this was, I feel like, initially pitched to us, and you guys can correct me if you think I'm wrong, but it was initially pitched as this is a universe that Darkseid has created.
Yes.
And as such, it is a universe where he has manipulated events with the hope of creating a universe without heroes, or a universe without hope that he can rule and control in some way. Am I off base on that? I feel like that was the way it was sold to us.
It is.
I'm going to be honest. I didn't pay attention to that at all. Did not at all.
Right.
Not saying that I didn't pay attention to you. I didn't pay attention.
No, I know what you meant.
I really did not care why there was a new universe at all. I didn't care.
Okay.
Well, what's interesting is that kind of story beat, I feel like, hasn't really come up in a major way in these first three issues. These first three issues, if you, like Drew, didn't know that was the intention, you could still read these and enjoy these and not feel lost at all, right? Which I think was smart because, like I said, that pitch, I kind of was like, oh, this sounds a little like edgelord. This sounds like it could be more, what if we did the DC characters but dark? And what I've actually kind of enjoyed about it, or not kind of, I have really enjoyed about it is the classic dark side folly, wherein he assumes that by putting someone in a situation where there is no hope, that they will succumb to hopelessness.
Mm-hmm.
And what has instead manifested in these three characters of Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman is they are still heroes, but they are heroes in different ways than what we're used to. And their heroism is manifesting in different ways than we're used to. Which has been kind of the hook of these three books, is what happens to these characters if you put them in a totally different scenario and change these things that are typically perceived as fundamental parts of their character and change them and put them somewhere totally different. Yeah, and that's kind of the general premise of it.
Yeah, I mean, because I want to cycle back to the fact that like Brian is maybe the biggest Kirby fan that I know, and by extension, you know, Fourth World and whatnot. But the big thing that it's funny because we've all been reading comics for a long time. We're very ingrained enough that we do, you know, a podcast on the regular, right? Like we are so in comics that it's sometimes hard to tell, like, what do people outside of comics think about all this? And I'm not worrying so much about that per se, but what I am thinking about is like, why should people care, right? And I think that if I'm gonna sum up the premise of this, and I mean we'll get into the continuity in a little bit, but the premise of this universe is that in the main DC universe, the superpowered people, the Justice League, they work well together, they know each other, good prevails because they have teamwork, they have history. Good guys will win, bad guys will lose, and there is a struggle, but there's always hope, because hope is like the underlying theme of the DC universe. Whereas this universe, this absolute DC universe, is created in Darkseid's image, which it's a bad universe, but it's not a sort of evil always triumphs universe. It's that evil should triumph. Why isn't it? Because as long as there's that splinter of hope, it can grow into something more, right? This should be a dead universe that decays, but it doesn't, just by the sheer existence of Bruce Wayne, Diana of Themyscira, and Kal-El of Krypton.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, well said. Well said.
I've been loving this, and you know, anyone out there who has not picked up their comics or not read this, or maybe they're waiting for the trade to come out. If you're not waiting for the trade to come out and you want to get those issues, go to comicshoplocator.com, find a comic shop near you, support your local comic shops, and check out, you know, some of these books. Absolute Batman #1, Absolute Superman #1, Absolute Wonder Woman #1 are already out, and they've already announced more titles.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Drew, do you have anything to add about the premise of this, or like,
I think
having read all three now?
The only thing that I really think is that I would add to it is that I don't think that this the whole like dark side thing, I think I think that it's supposed to be commentary on like the real world. The thing, like, you know, the other day, Mark Waid basically said, like, I don't know how to write superhero comics anymore because I don't believe that humans are inherently good right now.
Yeah.
Like, my faith in that is shaken. And I think that that's the whole point of this universe, is like we can explore stories where there is not this the basis of the universe is not everybody's mostly good. Instead, it's you know, you kind of get this chance to look at what does a universe built by infinite evil,
right?
Like, how does it prevail? and I think that is supposed to be a reflection of our times.
I haven't looked at it through this lens that you're stating, but now I do see it. So for, Mark Waid, acclaimed comic book writer for decades, arguably, in my opinion, like arguably the best in the biz as far as writing is concerned. I'm a big fan of Mark Waid. Him being and like writing Superman and writing the DC universe that is built on hope, losing hope himself because of real world incidents. That's sad. But then also, Drew, yeah, you bring up a good point. I think that a dark side universe isn't necessarily one where evil will prevail. It's that where hope doesn't exist. And I think there's a difference. It's like the absence of hope. It doesn't mean the proliferation of evil per se.
Mm-hmm.
But the question is that, like, if you don't have a universe built with the foundation of hope is eternal, can hope exist? And can this universe, like, get better? Which is our universe, right? There's no scientific fundamental property of physics that says that hope wins in our universe, in our real world, right?
No, yeah, for sure. And I think that, I mean, we might as well just get into it. It is ironic to me that both Marvel and DC are doing alternate universes that rely on this premise of there is a force that has manipulated the world to be in their image, an image that is sociopathic and evil in a lot of ways. And both of these books came out before the results of the 2024 election were officially announced, right? So I think that there has been something in the air, which is not surprising or mysterious, that makes people feel like, hey, the world is wrong. There's a lot of things that are fundamentally wrong with the systems of power that we have, and we're becoming more and more aware of, especially in America, we're talking more about the ways that our country is founded on a lot of evil acts that took place, right? That had to be built that way. Drew, go ahead. What were you going to say?
I was going to say, I think if I could summarize what I was trying to say, I was searching for the words, but I wasn't getting there. And I think what it comes down to is the absolute universe is what happens when you think you recognize the world in which you live, but you don't. Or you fail to recognize the world in which you live. And so that's the purpose of the absolute universe, is that it is a universe that looks like what we know in the DC universe, but it's not that. And it's close enough that you're like, oh, that's familiar, but it's different enough that you can say, I have no idea what's going to happen. And that's a reflection of where we are now, where people are not recognizing where they live.
Yeah. People who don't realize that, like, comic books are just like other media, right? Like, media in general is both manufactured and organic at the same time, right?
Yeah.
We get to choose where these, like, the writers get to choose where the stories go, but at the same time, it's a reflection of, like, art imitates life, life imitates art, and it's this, like, huge cycle, and then we just keep moving forward. Was it Brian who was bringing up the way Ultimate Marvel is versus Ultimate?
Yes, because I've been reading all of those, and I think that, I mean, if we want to compare it, I think the thing that Absolute DC has executed really well, that Ultimate Marvel, which I really enjoy, is I think failed at this at the beginning, is that I think Absolute DC is a lot more new reader friendly, where you can just, like, I could just pick up Absolute Batman #1 if I heard, like, oh, people are talking about this and they say it's good, and I can read it and be like, whoa, this is a radical reinterpretation of the character Batman that I have familiarity with, right? And if I often think of, like, if my students wanted to check these out, and then if I had one of my students who's like, well, I want to read, the Ultimates, the new version, I hear it's really good, I'm going to be like, all right, first you have to read this 4-part miniseries, Ultimate Invasion. Then you have to read this one-shot called Ultimate Universe. They had all these, like, prerequisites that you had to do to get into, I think, the 4 Ultimate books versus the DC Absolute books, which I think are pretty, like, you will get everything you need to know about this character's new status quo in this first issue. And you can go from there and learn more. Because again, this idea of like Darkseid having created this universe isn't a factor at all in these first issues. It's just, this is a new universe that is, as Drew put it, like has elements you recognize, but also is a skewed version of what you recognize, and a version where things have gone wrong in a way that they shouldn't have.
Is it Darkseid who created it, or is it? I read the All In special, but I'm going to be honest, I kind of have forgotten what happened. Isn't it like, was it Darkseid's death that created it?
It's unclear, I think.
Okay.
And I think it's deliberately unclear.
Energy.
Yeah, because he does whatever he does, but then there's also that bit where like Booster Gold's in the future and he sees like the Legion that's all been controlled by Darkseid.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's unclear to me if like that's the absolute universe. Or
I don't think so. I think
that's
whatever happens
of the absolute universe. Yeah.
I think whatever happens in the absolute universe, Darkseid hops over to DC Prime in that future. That's what I think.
I see. Yeah.
That's what I got out of it. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I could be mischaracterizing it by saying Darkseid created the universe. But he's obviously got some role in its birth. It's just unclear what it is.
If we want to get into the nitty-gritty of the lore, Darkseid dies at the end of that like DC All-In special, but Darkseid always needs to exist. So the multiverse essentially creates a new universe, I think, because of that. Like his essence exists as a universe because he has died.
And I think Darkseid dying is going to come into play in this new Rom v New Gods book.
Yeah.
That's coming out, from my understanding of it.
Yeah.
My understanding of it from what I've heard in an interview with him is that it's essentially like a child is born that is Darkseid's like reincarnation. And both sides of the New Genesis Apocalypse conflict are like, we got to find this kid and deal with it.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the basic story and how it starts.
So
we don't need to get into that right now.
I just want to say that like I'm not a big fan of Darkseid. I like I like simplified Darkseid, right? I like Darkseid as he exists in the cartoons. I don't like Darkseid in Snyder's thing. I don't think he's just an intergalactic tyrant. I think he's more than that. But I also don't think that he exists across the multiverse at all time through a shared mind. Like, I don't like that at all because it doesn't make any sense, because it makes it like, oh, the Darkseid in Smallville is the same Darkseid in Tiny Titans. You know,
Tiny Titans. Think about it too much. Yeah, I know Tiny Titans.
Yeah.
Was it Art Blazar? Is that guy's name? Anyway. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, if you think about it too much, it makes your head spin.
It doesn't make any sense. And
but I do agree with you that he's more meant to represent the abstract idea of evil and of fascist control of free will.
Right.
But he is meant to be like, I'm a big guy you can punch at the end of the movie or whatever.
Yeah.
Right. So luckily, these three titles, and we've only had one issue come out, each, and then a couple other titles that were announced is Absolute Flash, Absolute Green Lantern, and Absolute Martian Manhunter. Unless there were any more. Were there any more?
I don't believe any besides those other three that you just mentioned have been announced.
Yeah, I don't think so.
There might be more, but that takes us up to like March, because I think March is when the Green Lantern one comes out, or maybe April and May. I don't believe they've announced more beyond that.
Okay. Point being is that these three titles don't deal with Darkseid. Like, they're not.
No, at least not at this time. No.
Right. And so they're kind of their own stories. And let's talk about these three. Who wants to go first and pick one to start off with? Which one do you think is like the most
should we go in the release order?
Yeah, we could do that.
In the order that they were first.
That seems released? It seems like a good way.
Yeah.
Right.
All right. So then let's talk about the big boy, Absolute Batman.
Okay.
What did they? What was their nickname for him? The Batman who lifts.
That's very good. Yeah, no, this is a Batman who has replaced his money with sick gains. He is unbelievably huge.
Right.
Um, and I love everything about him. I love his whole vibe. I love his costume that is this origami smart tech that can do Spider-Man moves and Venom moves and become stilts that he can walk around on. Like I love everything about him. I think he's amazing. I love Absolute Batman.
Yeah,
What's yeah.
I really do. I did enjoy this issue a lot.
And I think I want to say up front too, I think all three of these are like pretty equally good. Like I don't think I would have a very difficult time really ranking one over the other. There's some like nitpicky things I can point to more on the art side of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But I
Yeah.
think story wise, they're all pretty terrific and very engaging and make me want to read more about these versions of the characters.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I was rereading, the three of these issues for this episode, and I was
Mhm.
trying to think of like they're all good, and I love them all, and I'm trying to figure out like why did I like certain things and certain moments and whatever. They do differ in a little bit of different ways by
Yes.
what they offer.
I
You know?
think for me with Absolute Batman, first and foremost, I love Nick Dragata's artwork a lot. I think he's got such a unique and distinct style, and it's one of those things where it's a little hacky to say like, oh, it's manga influence, but it's manga influence in a way that I find that I prefer when American artists are influenced by manga, where they're influenced more by composition and the way they set up action sequences rather than just like I'm going to make the eyes real big and try to just copy exactly what manga looks like, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And I find that his artwork has such fluidity to it. The character designs are so distinct. It looks very different from what a lot of American superhero comics offer. But on the story side of things, I think of the three, this was the one where I found myself asking a lot of questions in a good way,
Mm-hmm.
where I was like, oh, wow, this status quo is so different that I want to understand more about the history, about what these new versions of these characters are going to do going forward. Because there's so many characters that are introduced in this first issue that we know, even in very short, brief ways.
Yeah.
Like one of the things that's revealed here is that Bruce Wayne. So the kind of just elevator pitch of this one is, what if Bruce Wayne didn't have all his money? Like Bruce Wayne's parents are in this universe a public school teacher and a social worker, and he does not have the unbelievable wealth that he has to build his war against crime in the normal DC universe. So he's the working class Batman in a pretty dramatic way. But what you learn is that he basically was childhood friends with all of his major enemies, almost all of his major enemies.
Right. And
Like
and I should throw in that they're not his enemies, at least
Yes.
right now. It's
right,
not
right. They're just normal people from what we can tell.
Yeah.
They're maybe mixed up in some shady dealings. Like there's a comment he makes about like, oh, like Oswald's gonna get in trouble one of these
for
days.
exotic animal dealing, right?
Right. But they're not like, tying him to a giant typewriter and trying to murder him. You know what I
Right.
mean? So like that little element, I'm like, okay, so because he's a working class Batman, he's like grown up around these other people who are economically disenfranchised, who are often, people who fight him as supervillains. Like,
Yeah.
what does that change with their dynamic? And like, are they going to be like a team of heroes? Like, is his Bat family in this universe going to be the Riddler and Penguin and Killer Croc? Like, I'm really fascinated to see how this version of the universe evolves and changes as the story develops.
Drew, were you on the Comic Talk episode when this issue came out?
I think I was.
Oh yeah, you were. Okay, so we have talked about a couple of things, but yeah, I mean, how what do you think about Absolute Batman?
I liked it. I think that for me, the main draw leading up to it was Nick Dragata's art. Not necessarily because I had really seen a lot of it, but it was just kind of like, oh, I've never seen Nick Dragata do Batman before. In fact, the only thing I'm familiar with him from was East of West, the Jonathan Hickman Image book. And so it was like, oh, I've never seen him do superheroes before. And that's kind of there are other people. Wes Craig, I know him from Deadly Class. I've never seen him do superheroes before. So uh it was exciting, to know that he's kind of like part of this universe as well. They're not both of those guys, Dragata and Craig, are like not guys I would associate with superheroes or think to put on a superhero book
Hmm.
because their style is so different from conventional like DC house style. If you can call, I mean, I'm in my head, DC has a house style, but I don't know if other people would see it that way.
Mm.
And that isn't to say that like I wasn't excited about Snyder writing, but I've seen Snyder write Batman before, so I kind of knew what I was getting into. Uh, and it feels like a Snyder book. That is not a complaint. It feels like Snyder writing Batman, but the freshness of Dragata's art, then like that was the anticipation of that was exciting. Actually reading the book and seeing like what he's doing was also, I mean, it paid off, right? Like uh there's an established like language in his art
Hmm.
to this book. Um, it's stuff that you may have seen before, but he uses it very well. Um, there's a lot of, I mean, there's a rhythm to the pages because of the way that he uses bigger panels and smaller panels. I really like how you can tell, not just from the coloring, but like the fact that um, certain panels don't have outlines,
Hmm.
so they're flashback, and how he can make a double page spread of just the silhouette of a gun seem really exciting. Um, I mean, it's cool. The action sequences are cool, but I'm gonna be honest with you, I'm not a big action sequence guy in comics.
Really? Really?
Yeah, I mean, I just um,
It
they
has its place, but I
sure,
think that
absolutely.
it's fundamental to the genre, is it not?
It is 100% it has its place and it is necessary in superhero comics. 100% I agree with you. I'm not saying that I don't like them. I'm just saying that like for me
That's not the
in
draw.
yeah, like doing different kinds of storytelling in interesting ways. How do you make a a a, a page of narration exciting in your art? How do you make conversation between two people? How do you represent that visually so that it tells the story? Because half the story is told through the art. Shoot, I would say that it's probably not even half, or it's not. It's more than half. It's three-quarters of the story is told through the art.
Hmm.
Um, so I mean, like that's the stuff that has me really excited going into all of these books. But since we're talking about Batman, I mean, Nick Dragata's art is very cool. It's very fitting. It's like it's interesting. He's doing things that I recognize from like Frank Miller's Daredevil throughout this. Not necessarily like like I mean, he's not like stealing panels or anything or like redoing stuff that Miller did, but it's more so like the layouts and stuff are very reminiscent of Miller's Daredevil. And I think that's really interesting because like Miller, Frank Miller is like one of the first American artists who made it big by borrowing from Japanese comics. And
100%. Yeah.
Dragata is also borrowing from Japanese comics, but it also looks like it's like he's borrowing from American comics that borrowed from Japanese and then being like, oh, and this is what I took from other Japanese comics and mashing it together.
Yeah, no, 100%, 100%. And I think that creates a very unique and special blend that is exactly what you're describing. The fluidity of it, the dynamic layouts, like all of that creates this very, very distinct style of Batman and very distinct style for a DC comic in general. To your point where you were talking about house styles, I think that I think that you are right about that, about DC having a house style, but I also think that DC's kind of going through like a little bit of a miniature art renaissance right now, which is
Mhm.
aided by things like Absolute or things like Black Label, where they really are getting, I think, a lot more hands off with
Yeah.
artists and letting them just sort of do their own thing
Yeah,
to the
I think
point
so too.
where, yeah, and I read probably about an equal amount of Marvel and DC books every month. But I think that if I'm being forced to pick like who's got the best art side of things, I think it's kind of DC. Like there's a lot of Marvel books that I love, but I love them more for the writing than for the art. Which isn't a bad thing, and that's not to say they're poorly drawn because they're very well drawn.
Yeah.
But like I'm not getting something like Nick Dragata where I'm like, whoa, like these pages are blowing me away, and like there's nothing else that I've seen like this in this giant stack of comics that I read this week.
So I'm gonna pose a theory to you guys, and I want you guys to
Pose away.
Agree with me wholeheartedly. That's what
I'm-
you guys. That's what you need to do. All right. So my theory is because of the way DC Comics started and the way Marvel Comics started, the effect of genres affect them differently. So something that I noticed a long time ago is if I was to create a list of DC Comics top 10 world's greatest detectives, I could easily make that list. It's tough putting the characters together, but there's enough characters that could be great detectives in DC Comics, okay?
Mhm.
Marvel, it's not a genre. It's not a trait of a Marvel character to be a good detective.
Right.
On the flip side, if you want to do the smartest people in the Marvel universe, that is easy, right? And DC has that as well. You could make a list of DC characters, right, that are smart. But because DC existed as multiple companies that and decades before Marvel, and then kind of came together, they hold magic. Like magic as a genre is very specific in DC. Magic as a genre in Marvel tends to be, I don't know, not as pure.
If I could also
hard.
kind of branch off of that theory, I
Yeah.
think that also has to do with the fact that DC comes about, most of its most popular characters come about in a time when the popular genre fiction is crime detective pulp
Yes.
fiction, and then Marvel's characters come about in a time where the popular genre is sci-fi.
Yes.
Which is why we get the Green Lantern and Flash reinterpretations, which are much more sci-fi focused.
Yes.
But because of that, you can certainly make a list of the 10 smartest people, but those 10 smart people aren't detectives per se. They are just super scientist geniuses with 8 PhDs or whatever,
And
right?
if you did do the smartest people at DC, the smartest characters at DC, at the top of the list, you would have Mr. Terrific, and then everybody behind him would be a detective.
Yeah, maybe Lex Luthor would be second or third, but yeah, everybody else would be a detective for sure.
Yeah, when I was comparing Shadow Pact, which is a DC, magic-based team, or Justice League Dark, or just the lore of the magicians, I think it's because like DC had actual magic-based books back in the day, and I feel like when Marvel started, they started off with science fiction and created genres that branched from that, versus DC that started off as multiple different genres and then came together.
Right. And then they started crossing them over.
Right.
Well, and if we could tie back to Absolute Batman here, what I really like about this reinterpretation of Batman is it kind of addresses, I think these complaints are a little like overblown, and I kind of roll my eyes at them now. But, the classic complaint about Batman is, why doesn't he give his money to the city? Why is he beating up mentally ill people, et cetera, right?
Yeah.
And I think this version of Batman addresses that in a way that doesn't feel like a writer in a flop sweat being like, no, you don't understand. Bruce Wayne does donate to charity. It's
Right.
actually saying like, okay, what is a Batman without money, a working class Batman, going to look like? And they talk about like his training is not him traveling around the world. His training is he gets in on a football scholarship, fakes an injury so he can just spend all of his time studying.
Yeah.
And then once he does that, he works in like every facet of Gotham City specifically.
Mhm.
His training is not, I'm going to travel the world and learn all these disciplines from different people. His training is, I'm going to learn the disciplines of Gotham City.
Yeah.
I'm going to understand this place. And that idea of him being so connected to Gotham is a really good way of reinterpreting the world's greatest detective idea for a modern age, where you don't necessarily have to be the world's greatest detective to be a crime fighter, but you have to understand the social ills of the place that you live in order to be a protector of that place. And I thought that was a really smart reinterpretation of what a working class Batman would have to do in order to become Batman. He couldn't travel the world. He'd have to do something totally different.
Yeah.
I was going to say they kind of, I mean, at least in issue number 1, they don't deal with the detective part, right? And I'm thinking that like just the idea of being the world's greatest detective is an outdated sort of like trait for
you can Google everything.
There are no like what Marvel characters are great detectives? Like Tony Stark would just like look on a computer. Wolverine sniffs people. Okay, Spider-Man has a Spidey sense. He would just kind of like follow Spidey sense or whatever. Daredevil is getting a little bit closer. Jessica Jones, those street level characters, they're private eyes. They're using kind of.
You know who's DC or Marvel's greatest detective? And I'm sure that there's an argument against this, but this was just the first thing that came to mind as you were like going down the list. But I feel like it's a pretty compelling argument.
Is who?
The Punisher.
He's probably the only guy who has to actually do investigative work. He's got to hunt down these guys. Yeah, no, that's fair. That's fair.
I think it has to do with the street genre.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah.
Because that's all adjacent to like crime, Pulp Fiction, which is detective fiction, you know?
Right. So that's interesting. Daredevil, Punisher, Jessica Jones.
It's interesting. I'm gonna try to. I'm gonna bring this back to the kind of the exciting stuff about the Absolute Universe is that like when we talk when I make videos about comics, there's always something there's always some kind of argument going on in the comments or whatever about like I don't know, this character wouldn't do that. You've got this wrong. This character doesn't act that way. And it's just like I don't understand why in 2024 a character has to be bound to the cultural context of 1938, you know? Like they shouldn't be. They should be different characters. The characters should reflect the time in which they're being written, because that's just how good media works. And so the Absolute Universe is a way to completely circumvent that and just be like, okay, you don't know anything about this character. You have no preconceived notions other than they kind of resemble somebody who has been around since 1939, 1940, and 1938, you know, like.
And I think to that point, if I could go to kind of take this kind of a sad, but I think fitting with your point direction, it's telling that Batman's origin in this one is not that his parents are killed by muggers in an alley. It's that his father is the victim of a mass shooting.
Yeah.
In a public place. Yeah.
That's such the big things. I mean, I'm guessing since you brought that up, we're clear to just go spoilers.
Yeah.
Like, the big things in this book that are tying it to the current world in which we live. And I think that this is evidence of my whole thing earlier about, I think that this supports my whole thing earlier about like the dark side energy, like being, like the stress of all of us, like living through times where we don't recognize our world anymore is like, in this book in particular, it's this mass shooting, a real fear, a real anxiety that everybody in America really probably has in the back of their mind at times. You and I have to confront it literally every day because of our jobs. But like, so that's there. The fact that Bruce um, what you were saying earlier about like Bruce he doesn't have money, so he grows up around the people that we see as the villains.
And that being said, Prime Earth, a lot of these villains are villains. I don't
Yeah.
have much sympathy for some of these characters. Some of them are bad people put in, or
Yeah.
like good people in bad situations. And
Right,
like different interpretations of Killer Croc will make him more sympathetic and whatever.
Yeah.
And like,
Yes.
like animated series Killer Croc, I fuck with because that guy, it's really sad.
You know
But
what?
not
Poison,
cannibal Killer Croc. Like
the Killer Croc in the current Poison Ivy book is
Yeah.
the best Killer Croc.
He's exactly what you're describing. He's
Yeah.
just a big, lovable lunkhead.
Right. I mean, yes.
Who also
sorry.
maybe sometimes eats people, but like they but then like and it creates this really interesting sort of if it creates an interesting conversation that I don't know if this Bruce Wayne will ever get to confront. But it really just kind of there's an hypothesis here that because the Waynes never had money, these people don't become villains.
And I'm gonna push against that just real quick, and that is the idea that the absolute DC universe, it's not an alternate timeline. It is a ground up restructuring of everything DC.
Sure, yeah.
Because like people's races are different, people's like just people are born at different times and whatnot. So I'm just throwing that out there that it's just like the Ultimate Marvel universe that's out right now. I started off thinking it was an alternate timeline that it diverted, but it isn't. It's completely a different universe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
616.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And then finally, the last thing is the reveal about the Joker at the end.
Yeah.
The Joker is in this version. The Joker is a billionaire.
Yeah.
Which
is incredible.
What if we give the billions of dollars to a psychopath?
Yeah.
I mean, in the real world, we don't have to think about that. Like, it's not a thought experiment; it's reality.
I could think of a couple people who have.
No, I know. It's what I'm trying to say. It's not a thought experiment. It's not a thought experiment. It's a reality.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yes.
You know.
So, like, these are. I mean, we are tying all of this to like a newfound sense of class consciousness that the growing up with the internet allows us to have, because now we can finally like discuss with each other. Like we can learn for the first time, like what the pre-internet, let me kind of rephrase what I'm saying here. Pre-internet, you didn't really have an idea of where the class divisions were.
Right.
And how many people weren't in the top. You probably could like think about it, but you didn't know.
Yeah.
And now with the internet, we can communicate that to each other. And so like that's why I think so many things are different in the way that we think and view things now. It's why we have different understandings of race and gender in the modern world versus like the previous world. And so like bringing all this stuff in is just their way of reflecting our world back at us. And so I wonder if like the ultimate or the absolute universe is going to, that's going to be their thing. Like, hey, this is the world. This world looks like your world. And then maybe the regular like Prime Earth DC universe is going to be a little bit more hopeful and fantastical and kind of stay away from I mean, inevitably it's going to include things about our world because that's just how the creation of media works. But if they're going to try to make a conscious effort to try to be a little bit more optimistic, and let this one be more confrontational with our world.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I got a couple of thoughts. I think the DC Prime Earth universe runs on like the vein of hope.
Yeah.
I brought that up. I think the Marvel universe runs on a vein of struggle.
Mm.
I think that like struggle, like you can say like, will good guys ever win in the Marvel universe? They will neither win nor lose because it's always a struggle. DC has a more hopeful, like there is a hope, a utopian end to the DC universe, I would think. But Marvel is like, nah, mutants are always gonna struggle. It's gonna be the
Yeah.
end of time and whatever. And I think that like there's a good good to both of those from a storytelling element. Before we move on to another one of the books that has also class issues, which is Absolute Superman, I just want to I'm throwing up the cover, the opening cover of Absolute Batman with the silhouette of the gun, and it says The Zoo Part 1 of 5. And I'm just throwing, maybe I'm reading too much into it. I see the zoo, but I could also see the 200, and I don't know if that's meant to be a clue to something else.
I don't know. I think it could just be the font, but I mean, maybe.
Okay.
Wait, what is the 200 referencing? I'm
I don't
forgetting
know.
something.
I don't
nothing.
know.
Oh,
I
okay.
don't know.
Okay.
Well, I'm just saying, like, I don't know. Maybe it has something to do with it. The font is kind of funny, and I wouldn't put it past to just be something.
I thought there was some esoteric Batman creature villain called the 200 that I forgot about or something.
No. I'm just throwing it out there. I'm also throwing out the cover, not the cover, the internal splash panel of Batman having leaped off the building in his motorcycle against the silhouette of, or not the silhouette. He is the silhouette against the moon, and I thought it was really cool. Which you can see if you're watching us live on Twitch.com or Twitch.tv or YouTube.com. But whose favorite was Absolute Superman?
That was mine.
Yeah.
Mine was definitely Absolute Superman.
Oh, I just realized I didn't throw it up because I didn't transition this. That's one for anyone out there watching, and then that's also one. All right. Absolute Superman also tackles class issues. Something that Absolute Wonder Woman doesn't really. Though I love Absolute Wonder Woman for a different reason. Batman and Superman definitely have those like class issues in common.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why Wonder Woman feels a little bit different than the other two. But I mean, how'd you guys feel about Absolute Superman? What's the premise? What's the pitch of Absolute Superman?
The pitch of Absolute Superman is there's a lot going on. So I guess the like elevator pitch for it is what if Superman came to Earth not as a baby, but after he had already grown up a little bit. And I don't know exactly what age it is that he gets sent to Earth. I think he's supposed to be like an adult, but that's not actually like shown in this issue yet.
Yeah. He's got to be, I think by the end of the issue, we see him briefly, he's probably somewhere between like 7 and 10 years old. Like
we see him as an older kid for sure.
Yeah.
At the end of the issue.
He's not a baby.
Yeah.
I would almost describe it as, what if Laurel and Jor-El were also Ma and Pa Kent?
Yeah, I mean,
like, what if they kind of just merged them into one?
We were talking about that on the show on Thursdays. That just like it's really cool that they made his family on Krypton farmers to keep that like a part of it, but just put an interesting spin on it.
Yeah.
I think the pitch of it is that you get two storylines. One is Kal-El on Earth fighting against the injustices of corporations, against, corporations that are oppressing, working class people. And then you get the storyline on Krypton, where Krypton also kind of mirrors Earth in a way, with class struggle and the House of Steel. Right? Is that what they're called?
Mm-hmm.
The People of Steel.
People of Steel.
The laborers The people who work on the machinery are labeled the people of steel, and they're the bottommost rung of society. And everybody has to wear a crest on their chest to tell everybody else like where they actually stand in the social hierarchy and the economic hierarchy.
And
Which
there are
I
three. There are three, right? There's S for.
well, the thing is I don't think we know how many there are.
Oh, okay. There's at least three.
But we see like the science. We see the scientists in this. We see the laborers, which is the S.
Yeah.
We see the League of Middle Management.
Yeah.
And there might be more. I'm gonna flip through it here.
From what I saw, there was three, but there can be more, of course.
Yeah.
There's the sun, the big sun logo.
Yeah,
there's the
people of the sun.
MM for middle management, and
Yeah.
then there's the S. Yeah.
I think this was I really enjoyed the story of this one a lot, because again, I think, to your point, I'll briefly talk about this before we get too more into this, but I think what makes Absolute Wonder Woman a little different from these two is I think Absolute Batman spend a lot of time with world building in this one in a way that the Wonder Woman one doesn't as much. There's a lot of mystery still with the Wonder Woman book that we haven't quite explored, which I'm sure is coming, but there's a lot of questions that have been left unanswered with that one versus these two where I'm like, okay, I have a very clear perspective on how the worlds of this Superman and this Batman are different from one another, or different from the Prime universe at the very least. But it is fascinating because I was racking my brain and I really couldn't think of. Now I'm not going to act like I've read every comic that really goes into the minutia of Kryptonian society.
Yeah.
But it is funny that when we see Krypton society, it is very frequently portrayed as these highfalutin intellectual aliens, and that is typically the thing that causes their downfall, because when Jor-El implores them to be like, look, our planet's going to blow up, we got to do something, they usually dismiss him out of hand and be like, well, we're never wrong, so that's not possible, or whatever the case may be. So it's a very interesting take to say, all right, what if we flipped that and had Jor-El not only not be listened to, but part of the reason he's not listened to is because he is seen as part of the lowest class of this society. How does that change things, and how does that change our perspective of Krypton? This was the one that I'm not gonna lie to you, was very interesting to read after Tuesday's presidential election. Especially there was the bit where I forget the exact line that Laurel had, but there's a conversation that she's having with someone as she's fixing up the here it is. So there's a conversation she's having with a farmer as she's fixing up essentially his like space tractor, and he's talking about how he has to like pay money for rain, and she has a line where she says, you know how it is with the Science League, the science always takes a bit longer when it's for the Redlands. And I was like, I don't think this was Jason Aaron's intention, but this is that's an interesting line to hear after the events of Tuesday, because it does, I think. I mean, look, at the end of the day, there's a myriad of reasons why people vote the way that they do, and I think some are less excusable or less forgivable than others.
Yeah.
But there is, I think, a perspective here that is important to consider about the fact that there are people who live in impoverished rural areas that struggle with the idea of like, I don't have what I need, and I see other people who I believe do have what I need, and what resentments can form because of that, whether they're real or imagined, right? And I find that the thing that really stood out to me that I thought was interesting, because I know Jason Aaron, I don't remember exactly where Jason Aaron grew up. I don't know if he grew up in Alabama, or I know he's a Southern boy.
I think he's from Kansas. I think I read that.
I don't know if that's a good question, if he just like relocated to Kansas. And
I think, I don't remember where Southern Bastards takes place, but I think he's from wherever Southern Bastards takes place.
He was born in Alabama.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
That's where he's from. Okay.
So there's a part, and I don't know if this is based on his knowledge of this or real experience, but I'm curious to know if you guys are aware of this. They talk about her illegal sciencing when she's talking about, I could build you like a cloud seeder that can do that. And the first thought I had is that John Deere tractors
Right,
have
yeah.
computers built into them that are essentially proprietary technology. So the sort of like classical way that a farmer would deal with any mechanical issues, if your tractor breaks down or whatever it is you would just fix it yourself. But because of the modern, society that we live in, where we have these computers built into so many of these automobile, machineries, you literally can't fix it yourself. Like, it keeps you from fixing it yourself and forces you to bring it to a John Deere dealership to pay for them to fix it, or forces you to essentially buy an entirely new one.
Yeah.
And it's those like subtle little things that we have in our society where these larger corporations are inflicting unnecessary and new, for lack of a better word, taxes on people to
Yeah.
have to force them to pay for things that for a very long time you traditionally didn't have to. Finding new ways to just sort of squeeze money out of people. That line in particular really stood out to me and colored what I think Jason Aaron was trying to do with this particular book.
Yeah, just some background on Jason Aaron, because I think it's interesting that we bring it up. And like when you're reading books in high school English class, they also make you look into the author, right? Like they're like, where are they coming from? How does that affect their work, right? Or at least that's what I learned in school. But so he was born in Alabama. He moved to Kansas City, Kansas in 2000. For some reason, it notes it's the day after the first X-Men movie was released. I don't know why that matters, but okay.
He saw that it was inspired to move to Kansas for some reason.
I think it's that's according to an MTV article off of Jason Aaron. Interesting. That was written in 2012. He's a big fan of Alabama's football team. He was raised Southern Baptist, but has renounced religion, and he's been an atheist for many years. And he's more fascinated now by religion after he lost his, which I think is interesting. But he is writing
how we end up,
Superman.
That's how you end up with Gore the God Butcher. You become an atheist and then decide to go back to religion a little bit. That's how you end up with Gore the God Butcher. Yeah. So I think that perspective, I think of looking at this from like, all right, what if we put Superman in a sci-fi Kansas and did this sort of classical sci-fi allegory of class struggle, and made that a textual part of his origin story in a way that it's usually subtextual, or a lot of inferences have to be made, is great. I really enjoyed that. I think my little critique of it is I of the three artists, I thought this one was the one I enjoyed the least. Not that, again, it's bad. It's very good, but it's just like, it doesn't blow me away in the way that I thought the other two did. It's good stuff. Better than I can draw, for sure. But it just like didn't excite me in the same way that Hayden Sherman on Wonder Woman and Nick Dragotta did on Batman.
I think that this, who's the artist on Absolute Superman?
Rafa Sandoval.
Rafa Sandoval?
Yeah. I think he's Brazilian, so I think it's pronounced Rafa.
With an R?
In Portuguese, they pronounce the R's like we do H's.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
I dated a Brazilian woman.
There you go.
She
you're more of an expert than we are.
She taught me all about how the language works, except for like how to speak it. I can't speak Portuguese.
Yeah, I just know obrigado. That's all I know.
Yeah, Saúde. So yeah, and it makes that also kind of, I like that kind of makes sense though, because like the whole diamond mine part of the plot takes place in Brazil, so that's what kind of leads me to believe that he himself is Brazilian, because it feels like the two creators are putting themselves into the book. And I know that like comic nerds love to be like, well, you shouldn't self-insert. Like, fuck that. That's so stupid.
You know who self-inserted all the time? Jack fucking Kirby.
Yeah. Also, that's how you write stories. You take from what you know.
Right.
Don't know, you research it and connect it to the stuff you do know. But yeah, like it feels like that they are molding a Superman that is made by two worlds, right? One, like he's partially American and then he's partially like he's so aware of these class issues that it's influenced by somebody who would have grown up in a country that would have also been influenced by these class issues, by American influence, and then even their own struggles with like their country's authority figures and stuff like that throughout their history. It they're truly making a Superman of the world.
Yeah.
And I think that's what Superman needs to be.
Sure.
Originally he was created by like Jewish immigrants, or the children of Jewish immigrants. I don't think that they themselves were immigrants. I could be wrong about that.
I believe you're correct about that. Yeah.
But one of them was from Canada originally.
Oh, interesting.
If I'm not mistaken about that. I don't know if it was Siegel or Schuster, but one of them.
Schuster. I'm Googling it right now. Schuster is Canadian.
Okay, yeah. And
That's very funny.
They both ended up in Cleveland, somewhere in Ohio. And so they had a very North American experience. There would have inevitably been some more worldly influence from, like their Judaism. But it's a pretty North American experience, creating Superman, who is supposed to be, at that time, he was probably just seen as like a hero for America. But of course, that
specifically white North American.
Yeah.
Distinction,
But I do want to add up to that. If you ever go back and read that first issue of Action Comics, he's not fighting supervillains. He's fighting social ills. Yeah.
He fights like a mine boss. He fights.
He takes that one politician who's corrupt and like drags him all over Washington D.C., jumping around with him.
It's like the boss of a mine who's like taking advantage of his workers. He fights a guy who's beaten his wife. And he fights like a war profiteer.
Right. So him getting involved in literally fighting the bosses of a mine in this issue of Absolute Superman, right? Yeah. Like his heroic actions in this, even though we have the Peacemaker Corps giving that little bit of superhero flavor to
Lazarus Corps.
Yes.
Lazarus Corps, and the Peacemakers are like the paramilitary group.
They're the like Black
which I love. I love the number one. I love the idea that he is. It's not like it's anything new to Superman, but still, like in this issue, it just kind of sells it more and more. He's fighting a private military group.
Yes.
Which is like a libertarian's dream. And that they're using like the Peacemaker moniker to for those characters, because like Peacemaker, the modern version of Peacemaker anyway, like post probably, I don't know if it was intended to it was always intended to be this, or if it was just like a macho manly thing, but like eventually once DC purchased him from Charlton, he became a criticism and a critique on American foreign policy, with like the, he loves peace so much he'd be willing to kill for it. It's like putting them here, making that be like essentially the cops, but also adding the like privatized spin on it. I think is just, it's just more and more of like that class consciousness into it, and that I don't want to say subtle, because to me it doesn't feel subtle at all, but like to some people it might be a subtle political commentary.
Well, I think that superhero comics should never be subtle, frankly. I love when they're not subtle at all.
There's definitely a place. There's a place for subtlety, I think, sometimes. But for the most part, I do like when superhero comics just like come out and tell you what they're about.
Yeah, I like the world building in this, and I think there's like some specific interesting things that they bring up in this. One is that like there's Brainiac, there's some guy who looks like Brainiac, at least from the back.
Yeah.
Plugged in and like he's watching everything.
That version of Brainiac, like the bottled cities around him
They're
are like
screaming, right?
they're
Yeah,
screaming and
yeah.
they're splattered with blood that looks like it's got to be from the inside. So like he's creating little riotous like worlds.
Yeah. It seems more horrific than it's typically portrayed.
Yeah.
Where it's just like normally it's like, oh, we're tiny, this sucks. And
But
this
also,
like seems like they're in constant pain.
But he's in the he works for that company. He's in the R&D department at Lazarus Corps.
Yeah.
Yeah. Also Lois Lane.
Yep.
Lois Lane works for Lazarus.
So I did laugh a little bit when that reveal happened because I was like, I feel like the Lois in this universe and the Alfred in this universe are kind of doing the same thing.
They could be linked. We don't know.
That's true. That's true. Yeah. They're both working for some kind of shadowy Black Ops paramilitary organization and are spying on the hero in some capacity. I was like, oh, that's intriguing. I'm curious to, like you said, if there's a link here or what the deal is. But yeah, that was funny.
And then it shows the Kent farm, and the Kent farm's dilapidated, right? We don't know what has happened to them.
Yeah, I wonder if there's more story to that, or if that's just to tell us like, oh, the Kents are not going to feature in this story, because then that leads to the reveal of, oh, he's much older on Krypton right now than he normally is, and he clearly grew up there more than he grew up on Earth.
Yeah. We don't even know if he grew up on Earth. He might have just shown up in the past like 6 months, you know? Something that I find interesting about the Kents in this, the fact that we don't have any information on them, is if you're reading Dark Knights of Steel. Are you reading Dark Knights of Steel, anyone?
No, I have not read that one.
Okay, so Dark Knights of Steel is like a Game of Thrones, medieval sorcery, alternate universe of DC, right? And in that, both Jor-El, Lara, and Kal-El come to that Earth together. And because of that, they become king and queen, and then Bruce, his parents are also like helping with the kingdom and whatnot. So they're like Clark and Bruce grew up together, Kal-El and Bruce, but there's no room for the Kents. Like they are not needed in that origin story. And so what they didn't do it in the first 12 issues, but in this new one called Dark Knights of Steel, All Winter, they have a backup storyline. Are you reading that one?
I am reading that one. I did not read the regular Dark Knights of Steel, but I've been enjoying that.
In that one, they reveal that Jonathan and Martha Kent are knights, like they're like soldiers.
Oh, interesting.
And they find a baby Aquaman. They find a baby like Arthur, and they raise him.
Interesting.
And it's just the cutest kind of like parallel that like no matter what, they are meant to be a good influence on some superpowered being.
Right.
You know, whether or not it was Clark, now it's Arthur, right?
Interesting.
So maybe we don't count the Kents out on this one.
Yeah.
Maybe
I think that they wouldn't show us that if there wasn't
they
some
gotta
story
be
to
there.
tell.
They gotta be there.
Yeah. In your guys' opinion, what ties the same characters of different multiverses together in like DC? Like, they don't share the same soul, right? And some of them look different, right, from each other. But what do they share? What is has it ever been explained?
Do you mean like a metaphysical sense?
Yeah, in a metaphysical sense. Like all the Supermen of all the multiverse, like what do they technically share? They don't share the same DNA. They can't.
No. I don't. I feel like we got to call Grant Morrison and ask them that question. I think they're the only person who can properly answer that question for us.
The reason I ask that is that I think the general thing, and even if it's not literal, it's supposed to be metaphorical or physical, figurative, is that like these characters, although they have different upbringings and different stories, these characters of Clark or Kal-El in this case, Diana and Bruce are the same like soul, essentially. It's not necessarily exact, but the fact that like this is the same character grown up in a different world in a different way.
Right. Their personalities might be different, but their moral code and moral compass seems to be
down, right?
Similar, if not identical. Yeah.
Right.
Like they don't see, which is why going into this I was a little like, oh, is this just going to be like a Batman who murders people or whatever? But like reading, I'm like, oh no, this is the same character, but it's like a rose that grew from concrete kind of situation. Like they're in a much harsher world, and they maybe have to be harsher as a result, but they are still ultimately heroic in doing the right thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I wanna hit Absolute Wonder Woman. And
let's do it.
Absolute Wonder Woman, to me, the pitch to me is, this is a world, for some reason we don't get the full description, but the pitch is that like Wonder Woman as a baby is not raised by Themyscirans or the Amazons. She is raised by essentially Wonder Woman's like worst enemy in the mainline comics, Circe. Circe raises her instead of Hippolyta, and Circe is essentially in hell, in like a hell prison. So Wonder Woman grows up as the daughter of Circe, and she grows up in hell.
Yeah.
But she still has the compassion and the curiosity and all these like great qualities, having grown up in prison. It kind of mirrors Bane in a way.
Oh, interesting. I hadn't thought about that.
I
But
just realized that.
I can see that.
But
yeah.
Bane uses it as an argument on why he's so cruel, right?
yeah.
But Wonder Woman is raised in hell by Circe, again, the evil witch from Wonder Woman comics. She's raised as her mother, and although this comic doesn't like get into the big lore and the world building, I would argue that this comic deals with the character of Wonder Woman better than the other comics deal with their character of their main character's character.
Yeah, because it is kind of an inversion where we get a lot of world building of this new status quo versus this one, which is much more like, this is the backstory of this version of Diana and how she was raised. And it's kind of, I've been saying to people, it's like if Wonder Woman was a Berserk character, if you're familiar with the manga Berserk, because just the fucking
She's
horse,
a barbarian,
skeleton, and the giant sword, and like all this is like very dark fantasy vibes, which I really loved. I thought it was terrific, and I loved the artwork and the action in it again, and I thought that was really interesting. But I do agree that if I had a critique, it's like, well, I got so much interesting world building in the other two that I'm like, I'd like to know more about what happened to the Amazons a little bit. And like, I'd like to see a little bit more of how this Wonder Woman is going to be different from the mainline Wonder Woman, other than being much more like, aggro and warlike.
Yeah.
But what I got, I'm like, I'm definitely intrigued to read more, and definitely would love to read more because I like this setup and what I'm seeing of her so far.
What really sold me about this book is her growing up. So what I really loved, something that like, there's something like very heartfelt that happens in this comic that doesn't happen in the other two, although there are very great scenes in the other two. This one specifically like hit me, or like tugged on my heartstrings, is when in the beginning a snake goes for her. She grabs a snake and she throws it, right? She doesn't rip it in half.
Can I just interject and say that's maybe the greatest panel in a comic I've seen all year, because she throws it and the sound effect is yeet in tiny yellow letters. That got me real good. I love that.
It also mirrors Hercules.
Yes.
Right? Hera sent a snake to kill Hercules, and Hercules kills the snake, right? But Wonder Woman doesn't kill the snake. She throws it. Who knows what happened to the snake? But these are also magical creatures, right? So she throws the snake, whatever. Later, she's a baby, and a little lizard comes to breathe fire on her, and she says, no, no. She grabs the lizard, and you expect some sort of thing, right? You expect her to like lash out at the thing. But then she like, I think, kisses it and like tames the beast, right? You see a lot of that, her taming the beast, and it's something that I brought up, I forget, on the episode where we talked about this on Comic Talk. I talked that like the idea that Wonder Woman tames beasts is not a normal trait that is like portrayed much in Wonder Woman media. Like it's an older kind of power of hers, but you never see it. You never see it in the movies. You don't see it much in the cartoons, if ever. Like, she is known in the comics to tame beasts.
She's got that pet kangaroo in those old comics.
Yeah, but they're domesticated. That's just a thing.
All right.
That's like, you know, but
Sure,
like she
sure.
classically can tame a dragon if she wanted to. Like that's just her, because she gets that power from Artemis, right?
Right.
One of the many powers of the Greek goddesses. And so I loved that moment, and so that kind of sold me on like, okay, this is who Wonder Woman is. She has not been hardened by hell. She's still like, she hasn't been corrupted by hell. None of these characters are corrupted.
Which, you know, my comment earlier about Darkseid's folly is, if I could be a Kirby nerd for a second, one of my favorite things about the fourth world is the idea that Darkseid and Highfather, the world of New Genesis, they, in order to create a pact between their a peace treaty between their two worlds, they trade sons. Darkseid says his son to be raised by Highfather, and Highfather sends his son, Scott-free Mr. Miracle, to be raised by Darkseid. And Darkseid gives the child to Granny Goodness, is like, throw him in the X pit and like break his spirit and make him one of our, you know, slaves. And Scott-free refuses to break. He tries his entire life to escape from this prison until he eventually doesn't, right? He never loses hope. And then the reverse kind of happens with Orion, where I think Darkseid's expectation is, oh, my son is evil and will probably destroy them from within.
Or be mistreated like he would mistreat Scott-free.
And Orion's first act in that story, The Pact, is he lunges at Highfather with a knife. And Highfather like gives him an open hand and says like, that's not the way here. And like, take my hand, let me show you a more peaceful life. And Orion does it. And that's kind of Kirby's thesis, is like, you could put the worst person of the world in a situation where they'll be loved and cared for, and their life will be better and they will become better. And you could take someone who is born of like good and put them in the worst place, and they will not break, because the human spirit cannot be broken. And I think that kind of is what's happening in these stories, right? It's like Darkseid putting these characters in, or Darkseid's energy, whatever we want to define it as, putting these characters in a terrible place where the great things that they have in their lives have been taken from them, and they still find a way to endure, and their spirits are not broken by it.
If we're done talking about these three first issues, I want to talk about like what's to come and kind of like the bigger thing, but kind of tying in. I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, what is the point of the absolute DC? What is the end game? And the goal of comic book storylines is to never end, right? Or to constantly evolve or whatever.
I'm curious if that is the goal here. Because I almost feel like there is a part of me that has wondered if maybe the point of these stories is to have a finite beginning and end.
Yeah.
And maybe these aren't meant to last forever.
That's true.
I don't know. I have no reason. Nothing has like given me that like persuaded me to think that or anything like that. It was just the conversation came up, and it was kind of just like, oh, well, if they really wanted to set themselves apart, they could do that. Like this could be a beginning and an end. And you know, DC has a history of like,
not seeing things through.
We're gonna do this new thing and to an end at a point. Like, you know, New 52 was that.
Yeah.
The Rebirth universe was that.
Yeah.
Well, I kind of, to that point, I almost think this has the possibility to have a longer shelf life than, say, the Earth One graphic novels.
Yeah, for sure.
Which feels like their last attempt at doing their own version of Ultimate Universe. Because I think at the end of the day, like, we can have, you know, people can debate all day long about the value of the single issue market, but I think the value of it is that it does keep conversation going about books for extended period of time, more often than one graphic novel that comes out every few months, or if you're lucky, would do. It's kind of similar to the argument about the binge model for TV versus the weekly model for TV, right? When you have an ongoing conversation, it puts those titles in front of people. So I don't know. I think this has the possibility to potentially last a long time, but in this modern market, I mean, who knows?
It also,
it's hard to say.
it's been argued that comics do something that other medium don't do, and that's because of the quick turnaround of the
Sure.
process allows narratives to change as quickly as you want them to, right? Like you got to write the issue, you got to put the issue out, but like you can constantly be changing. You're only a couple months away, right? Like you can kind of shift things, make things work in a different way than like writing a full season of a TV show. And like
or respond to things that are happening in the world in a more direct way.
Right. And so if that's the case, and then you are just focusing on trades, which trades are wonderful. I love my trades. That's my bookshelf. Like, you're still going to be getting it 6 months later, and you're only going to get it every 6 months. So once again, everybody, comicshoplocator.com, find a comic shop near you. But I think if they tackle Absolute DC like Marvel tackled the Krakoa age, the 5-year-long Krakoa age, essentially what they did was Hickman, he didn't see the third act, right? Like but he created essentially the beginning, the middle, the end, what he thought, and then he said that the middle can run as long as you want it to run. So if you create a beginning and an end, and you have the middle that allows for freedom to do whatever you want, and then come back to the end when you're ready to close things out, then you're allowed however much time. They want Absolute DC to last 10 years or last 1 year. They could wrap it up right now,
I mean, I'm looking at, because I was curious how long the original Ultimate Universe lasted, and that was 15 years.
Yeah.
Which is longer than I thought it was.
But they were constantly reinvented.
Oh, for sure.
For better or for worse.
I think the difference, though, is that, like, they really didn't know when they made the Ultimate Universe. They didn't know it was. It was just kind of be this another, running concurrently, ongoing stuff. I'm not saying that I like read this anywhere. I have any sort of like insider information or anything like that. But if DC wanted to, they could be planning an ending for this already.
Sure.
I
think it's all going to come down to sales too. I mean, like if it's their highest selling thing, they're going to keep this thing running until the wheels fall off.
I one of the things that I like about indie books, like non-superhero comics, is I think that an ending can really add a lot of meaning to your story. And so,
for sure.
If they came out and said these books are finite, they're not going on forever, that would be really exciting to me.
Interesting. I wonder how people in general would feel about it, though, because I do agree with you that like having a clear ending definitely would make me feel like, okay, I'm excited to see this through to where it goes. But I do wonder if some people would feel less enthusiastic.
Feel like, why am I reading it now?
Right. Or
because people can't just enjoy a story.
Yes, 100%. Superhero comics fans, especially.
Oh, I get it. Why am I even reading this? It's not going to matter in 3 months. Do any of them?
Right.
Do any of them matter in 3 months?
Yeah. I mean, what's the Alan Moore quote from The Man Who Has Everything, or from Whatever Happened to Man Tomorrow? This is a fictional story, aren't they all?
Yeah.
This is an imaginary story, aren't they all? Yeah, that's kind of my philosophy on it. And enjoy it. Don't just worry about, is it going to matter? Is this going to impact a larger universe? But I don't know.
You're coming at it from an angle of audience enjoyment. I would also look at it from an angle of audience procrastination. If you know it's going to end in 5 years,
you might wait.
I'll just binge it in 5 years. Like,
right.
People don't all like. Is this an ongoing story where I'm going to feel left out by not staying up to date, or is this a finite story where, hey, there are going to be people that are going to read it when it finishes, just like I am. So I'm on the second wave. I'm on the last wave of fans, but I'm at least part of a wave. It's like,
that's true.
There's something for everybody here, but I think that like how they decide to wrap things up wouldn't it be a cool metaphysical thing? So Brian brought up the trading of the New Gods kids.
Mm-hmm.
If we're viewing the absolute DC universe and the DC universe as having two different sort of foundations, right? One is of hope, one is of like corruption and deceit, right? Or whatever. What if they pull a New Gods and they trade children, right? Like Darkseid moves over to the main Prime Earth after having set up this, and then whatever whatever DC has, the Prime Earth moves over to here, and they both kind of switch up.
Well, I mean, a crossover is inevitable. I feel like they're going to.
They've already said it's happening.
Yeah, like come on. As opposed to with the Ultimate Marvel universe, where they mostly didn't really have crossover except for like Miles meeting Peter.
Yeah.
Like I fully believe they're gonna do a crossover the next like 2 years or so at most.
That is a 2 years. I think you're being conservative with that. I think I'm not joking. I think that I think
it can't
Snyder,
happen before 2 years.
I think Snyder has said that they're planning for something this summer.
Wow.
No,
that's crazy.
That's only like 4 issues from now. You
know is it? But is it something where it's like Absolute's going to cross over, or is it like building on this Darkseid story, like what happened with Booster Gold?
Yeah,
where did he end up?
It has to be, right. Like it has to be Booster Gold visits this universe, as opposed to
at most,
as opposed to like 2 versions of Bruce's shaking hands.
Yeah, the like Crisis on Absolute Universe, whatever it might be called.
Because it's funny because we've been reading. Is it safe to say we've all been reading comics for decades?
Yeah.
Okay. You know,
at least 2.
Which is funny because I'm only 21, so that's crazy, you know, for me. But the idea that like comic arcs, like a trade is 6 issues, which is roughly 6 months. So like you get 2 arcs out of a series every year.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea that like they would cross over so soon is like, you just have finished the first arc. Like you can't really have set anything up.
Sure.
You know?
Well, I think these are going to be 5. I think each of these first arcs are 5 issues.
Yeah.
I think they say like 1 of 5 in each.
I have the cover. Oh, so
because that's how things work now.
Yeah,
arcs
Absolute
are 5
Batman
issues.
is 1 of 5. Superman doesn't say it; just says part 1.
I think I could have sworn I saw something that said part 1 of 5. But
and then
I misremembered.
Wonder Woman is 1 of 3. Oh no, sorry. I read it weird. 1 of 5. Sorry, that was the resolution on the screen. But Superman, I don't think it says 1 of 5, but it probably, you know, would be. It just says part 1 though.
It does say part 1.
Okay.
I think I've seen people say that like they said it was going to be 5 or something like that. But then again, I also can't find the evidence to back up my thing about the summer crossover. But I could have sworn that I read that somewhere.
Are you thinking about the Ultimate Marvel crossover?
No, I'm thinking. I remember that like at a convention or something, you know, he had said something about it and people were commenting on it in like a Reddit post or something like that. Mm-hmm. I can't find it now, but
okay.
Interesting.
There have been certain titles that have been released. I got the images up here. First of all, Ultimate Flash. Does anyone know what it's gonna, or not Ultimate? I keep saying Ultimate. It's absolute
Flash. Yeah,
absolute Flash. We can just call it Ultimate. It's fine. We all know what it is.
I'm pretty sure it's Wally.
It looks like it's Wally.
It's Gen Alpha Wally.
Yeah.
And then there's also an older, I'm assuming Barry.
Right.
Or it's his father. I don't know.
And the rogues are pretty present, it seems.
Yeah, and one thing that it seems like is that the rogues are treated as heroes in
that's interesting
version, which I'm interested to see, because I also think it's going to tie into this kind of class consciousness sort of commentary.
You just learned that phrase, and now you're just using it everywhere.
No.
Excuse me, sir. Is this burger class consciousness?
It depends on where you got it from.
Depends on where you got it from.
I can go into why Five Guys is the tool of the fucking
what?
The bourgeois elite.
Oh,
If you want me to.
is it?
As much as I love it. As much as I love it.
Is that a real take?
Five Guys, it's like $15 for a burger.
Oh, yes, that. Yes, the pricing.
But I want it so bad. They make it so delicious.
I like Five Guys a lot, but you know.
To be fair, every burger at Five Guys is 2 patties, so it's really 2.5 guys per patty.
Well, you would put it like that. I'm a sucker not to pay the $15.
Exactly.
What was that? Oh, so Ultimate Absolute Flash looks like it deals with Wally, and yes, it has been stated that like, yeah, it's gonna be about like the rogues are the establishment, and Wally is not. I don't know who the guy is on this panel though.
I'm just happy to see a Flash story where he's fighting the rogues, because I'm so tired of him fighting other speedsters.
Yes. The Flash CW show, that's where I think it fails.
Yeah. How did we never get an episode where like 8 of those dudes team up and try to jump him?
The problem is that like comic books, and this ties in with the fact that we didn't know that was Lois Lane and Absolute Superman #1. Like, media gets different tricks depending on on what media it is, right? So like the MCU, the way I saw it was they get almost like a golden opportunity to tell new stories of the Marvel Universe, having characters age up and age out.
Right.
Which Marvel Comics will never do. Like, they will never phase Steve Rogers out.
No. Miss Marvel is still in high school.
And, but Miss Marvel now has to be in college. Like, why wouldn't she?
Okay, can we do a quick sidebar? I read NYX recently, and it is so funny to me that she's taking like extracurricular after school classes at a college, but is still in high school. I'm like, just let her graduate, guys. What are we? This is bullshit. This isn't a real thing. She's commuting after school every day to a college to take more classes.
I didn't realize that. I didn't realize that because she's also going to clubs with Sophie.
That's what I'm saying. She's in college now. Just say it. I'm sorry. Anyway,
I think that because the problem is they need her. Her and Miles are the same age,
so they're never gonna graduate
until they bring in new. Well, they have been bringing in new younger characters.
Yeah. Maybe in the next 4 years they'll graduate if those characters hit.
Do either of you watch The Simpsons?
I watched it pretty religiously for most of my life, but I'm not caught up on newer stuff.
So if you don't know, Simpsons recently, they're the
Treehouse of Horror.
No, it was the season premiere for this season. The newest season premiere was called the final episode of The Simpsons, or like the Simpsons series finale, and the episode was about Bart turning 11. Because like he's been 10 for 35 years. And so and then the whole episode is about how like he's trying to like not turn 11, and he finds a way to keep it from not happening, and so the show has to go on.
But then they cut away, and then they kind of say it's not in continuity, right? Isn't that what happened with like they show it? Don't they show it in an award show or something? The
whole episode is from a celebration where Conan O'Brien is like returning to The Simpsons to host the series finale, and he asks AI to write the series finale. And so it's like just full of all these different tropes. Anyway, the reason why I brought that up is because this is exactly what happens with certain comic book characters, but some of them do get to age. Like Nightwing got to get older, but Dave doesn't, and Tim doesn't really get to.
Yeah, and it depends on when they were created. I mean, I bring this up all the time. Peter Parker is out of high school in like the first 30 issues.
Yeah,
like if they had him, I think if Marvel had their druthers, he would be back in high school and never age. Sure. If they could, he would just keep him there forever.
That's why they did the original Ultimate Marvel universe, is to set the clocks back. I mean, I have my like theories and my headcanons of like how old are these characters and whatnot. And like to me, like Bruce is like early 40s, like he has to be in his early 40s. I don't ever want to be at an age where I'm as old as Bruce Wayne. Like this is a problem for me. I do not want to do like Bruce Wayne is
That's
not,
how I feel about Spider-Man.
You know? Spider-Man though has to be in his 30s. Like early 30s, and he's a little like a couple years older than Kitty Pryde, you know?
Yeah.
And so like little things like that. But something that I did a video recently, somebody said, oh, what would the X-Men do for Halloween? But it's the giant-sized X-Men team. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to tell you what they would dress up for Halloween, but we're taking it back to 2009. Because if we're judging it, like I would say giant-sized X-Men came like in continuity was 15 years ago. I would say that's a fair enough time, like amount of time. 15 years ago. So that means like Storm was 19 in 2009. Which is also really weird because
the more you think about it, the more upsetting it gets.
It's
frankly.
very upsetting.
Well, do you know the reason Frank Miller wrote Dark Knight Returns was because he had like an existential crisis when he realized he was older than Batman.
Yeah.
He was like, oh my God, I'm older than Batman. He was like, what would an old Batman look like? And then that's how Dark Knight Returns came to be.
I think it's what's sad to me is that growing up, I always was like, I'm Beast Boy. I want to be Beast Boy. And then now I'm like, I can never play Beast Boy. Like, I'm not Beast Boy's age. I don't want to look like Beast Boy in that Teen Titans cartoon when they go to the future and he's like short and bald and paunchy. And like, I don't want to do that. So I'm hoping that never catches up to me. Anyway,
can I ask what we think about the other two Absolute books, Green Lantern and Martian Manhunter?
Listen, you know, we what I wanted to say before we get off, we started on the subject of Flash. Flash is by Jeff Lemire, and I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, the art looks amazing.
He's always great.
Yeah.
I didn't realize it was the Nice House on the Lake guy. Like it looks so radically different from that because the tone is so different. But he's a terrific artist, so I'm excited to see what he does in this different space.
There's this thing they're taking artists who you don't usually associate with superhero stuff and kind of giving them that chance.
Yeah, for sure.
Green Lantern, you know, it's Joe Mullen, which I think is a really great. That's a really great choice because
100%.
Everybody else is like, all of these are you know the version, or at least you know a version of the character that we would assume it would be.
Yeah.
With the exception of maybe Wally, I think that most people would probably think that a rebooted or a new version of Flash would be Barry, but it makes sense to do Wally because so many people just associate the Flash with him.
I'm glad it's Wally.
Yeah.
Using Joe Mullen is like, that is not what I would have expected. And I think that's what's exciting. I can't remember the creative team on this.
It's Al freaking Ewing.
Okay, Al Ewing,
which I cannot wait for. And the artist I'm not familiar with, Joni Lindsay. I'm not familiar with them, but I like what I'm seeing from the preview pages. It looks cool.
Yeah.
I will say though, I am I'm so excited for this book. I love Al Ewing. I am a little salty that apparently N.K. Jemisin had another idea for a Joel Mullen story and DC just like wasn't interested in doing it and picking it up. Because I'm like, she created that character and that book was great. So let her cook. What are we doing? But I am excited that Al Ewing is doing Green Lantern. I think he's a great fit for that character in that world. And I'm excited to see what he does getting to kind of reimagine it from the ground up.
Yeah.
Also, it looks like Hal and John, if I'm judging them just by their faces on this artwork, looks like Hal and John Stewart are going to be part of this as well.
Yeah, from what I'm seeing in this interview or this like con write-up about it, it seems like she'll be the main character, but there's going to be lots of other well-known lanterns that show up
world
throughout.
Building. That's what I'm missing. Like, I love where all these titles are going. I just need more world building.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna be honest, I'm not sold on the Martian Manhunter. And it just seems really weird and like existential and like, which is kind of cool. But also I'm gonna be honest, and this is a personal thing. I don't like white John Jones, and I know that like John Jones was white in like the first however many iterations of the comics, but
Yeah.
like slowly over time, like they kind of made John Jones' human form black, and I'm not a fan of this guy looking like Nate Cordry. If you know who Nate Cordry is, Rob Corddry's
What a poll!
brother.
That was quite the poll of a celebrity to choose for that.
Nobody. If you know, you know. If someone could look up Nate Cordry,
funny.
that he looks exactly
Nate
like this.
Cordry. Well, okay,
It's Rob
so
Corddry's brother.
I love this creative team so much. I love Denise Camp. He's writing what I think is the best Ultimate Marvel book, which is the Ultimates. I love Javier Rodriguez so much. Like the idea of him doing a Martian Manhunter book, the insanity of the like transformations we're probably going to get from his artwork is going to be so great that like that carries everything else. I will also say, to your point about not liking that choice, it seems like the relationship between the Secret Identity and the Martian Identity are going to be very different in this one, where John Jones is just a guy, and the idea of the Martians seems radically different in this, where they don't even seem to have a physical form. They're like a consciousness. Right. So it's like it's going to be a little different than that. I can understand that perspective though, and I respect that. But I don't know. I mean, this is such a killer creative team, and putting them on a Martian Manhunter book seems like such a home run to me that I cannot wait for this one. This is the one I'm most anticipating of the upcoming ones.
Look, it looks like I'm not. I think it's going to be great, but I'm not. I don't know whether it seems almost like Cthulhu mythos, where it's like it seems like the Martian part is coming from another plane of existence into his brain. That's what I think.
This is so funny. Everything you're describing is giving you pause, is making me more excited. You're like, it looks weird and existential. I'm like, yeah, it looks weird and existential. I'm psyched. I can't wait.
It's kind of why I like the Lucifer comic better than Sandman. Like Sandman's great.
Sure.
But
that opinion aged very well, Dimithri. I'm not gonna lie to you.
Okay, but like
we don't have to get into why, but that opinion aged very well. I'm just gonna put that
the Lucifer comic is more straightforward
than
Sandman is, because Sandman's very like blah, you know. So like okay, so I don't know whether I want like I guess this is the character they could do this for, right? If they're doing an absolute version of it. Okay. All right.
I just love the design of him so much that Javier Rodriguez like made it out of clay and then drew it. Like it's
is that what it was?
Oh. Yeah, he did it out of like Play-Doh first.
Yeah, if you look at like the design, it's just a little like
it's a little Play-Doh figure. It just looks so interesting. I love it. It's so alien. It's so weird. I'm so excited for it.
It has a very like like the 1960s War of the World.
For sure. Which is very fitting for Martian Manhunter, I think. That's a great aesthetic for that character. Yeah, I'm excited. That one was good.
I am very excited for Martian Manhunter because Martian Manhunter isn't a character who gets a lot of love, and he should.
Yeah. I mean, when was the last time he had like an ongoing series?
An ongoing one? A long maybe like the 90s or the 2000s.
No, he had an ongoing during
he had a limited series.
Yeah, there was that limited that
by
was Orlando and Rossimo?
Orlando and Riley Rosmo,
yeah. But like a proper ongoing. I mean, what, in the 90s when John Ostrander was writing it, there was that one?
There probably was something in the 2000s, but I can't.
Did he get a New 52 book?
I thought he got a New 52 book, but I could be wrong.
He did not get a solo New 52 book. He got he was the head of
he's the head of Stormwatch, right?
Oh yeah.
I forgot about that. That was wild.
And people
so weird.
People did not respond well to the character. They made him a lot more like mean.
Yeah. No good. Yeah. Well, let's see.
But I think I as much as I like Martian Manhunter.
Mhm.
I do think there is an argument to be made that he just works better with other characters and in an
Sure,
ensemble piece.
that's
Uh,
fair.
so, but with again, I mean, they can do whatever they want with this new version. The only
Exactly.
thing I can see is that they are keeping like that he works as a cop in his
Hmm.
life because he's got the little badge down there. Unless that's
Yeah.
there some kind of red herring, but
No, it does say he's an FBI agent.
okay,
But Denise Camp also describes it as a man who merges with this alien consciousness and slowly starts losing his mind.
love it.
So how long he's going to stay an FBI agent, I don't know.
That's great. It sounds maybe this is like the David Lynch superhero book.
I love that. I love that.
I did
That
have a
sounds terrific.
I did have a pitch once when CW was doing a bunch of comic shows, right? For a Martian Manhunter solo series before he was like they did the Supergirl show and he was a main character on that, but
Mm.
like a like a kind of a crime noir procedural show where he's living on Earth and dealing with white Martian serial killers and that sort of thing. But you
Yeah.
know, not only did that idea not get picked up, I never pitched it. So, so yeah, whatever.
That tends to stand in the way of ideas getting picked up.
Yeah, you win
I'll
some.
tell you what though,
You win some, you lose some.
a Martian Manhunter sort of like I don't know, Red Dragon, Silence of the Lambs sort of thing, dealing with a white Martian. Uh, that's a kind of a cool idea. Like,
All right,
That's a
well,
little bit what the Rossimo and Orlando
Orlando.
series was like. Yeah, that one's a good one. Underrated book.
I didn't make it past issue 1.
Oh, well. Worth giving it another shot if you're interested, but
I think what helps a lot of these. I mean, this applies to Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman, and upcoming Flash, Green Lantern, etc., is that you need a good supporting cast.
Mhm.
And Batman, absolute Batman, I think that biggest strength is its cast of characters.
Yeah.
Superman really only has a good cast of characters on Krypton that we've seen. Like,
right.
that's like the more fleshed out ones. And then Wonder Woman doesn't really. It's just her and Cersei, essentially, right?
So far, but
Yeah.
there's so much. You mentioned earlier that you thought that Wonder Woman was a little light on the world building, and I disagree with that. I think that it's just more subtle in its world building.
Sure.
Because
Yeah.
in this first issue, we've established hell, we've established the Greek gods, we've established black magic. We have this upside down pyramid thing. We have the creatures coming out of it.
Yeah.
That she got this the blade, what does she call it? The blade of Athena, which was forged by Hephaestus. So
Yeah.
like are all adventures and places that adventures she's gone on, places she's been, and
Yeah.
they're just, like they're just waiting to unfold. And so the cast of characters is there. We just
Yes.
haven't seen them yet.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think when I say world building, I think I mean it from the perspective of like we see Alfred, we see the rogues, we get these little hints of like these characters that we know really well and what they're going to be doing. I just would have liked to have seen more than that, but at the same time, I did really love the relationship between Wonder Woman and Cersei. Like as a relatively new parent, I could relate a lot to the feeling of like I got to keep this kid alive and the stress that comes with that. Like there were some very beautiful lines about parenthood in that really resonated with me. Still a very strong book, and I'm super excited to read the next issue of it.
Yeah. I made a comment when we talked about it on Comic Talk, is that Cersei was going to let the baby die, but not because Cersei is necessarily evil, but because Cersei doesn't want to love anything that will die, right? Like it's that idea of like loving someone means also fearing their absence, right? And so when she realizes the baby isn't going to die or not die easily, Cersei is able to open herself up to love. I think, in that first issue. As we close up this episode of Keeg Talks Absolute DC, do you guys have any final thoughts? Anything you guys are looking forward to? Is there a character that you really want to see an absolute take on?
Yes.
Who?
Oh, that was the second part of the. I thought you were just asking.
Yeah, yes or no questions from here on out.
There are a few who I would like to see, and some of them are like lesser known. The Question.
Ooh, yeah.
I'd really love to see the Question in this universe. Hawkman. So because I mean, it depends on. I mean, really, just any. It depends on is the cosmic stuff is going to be established by the Green Lantern book. So, like, what do Rand and Thanagar look like? Do we have to tie Hawkman to Thanagar?
Right.
And do we have to keep the what's the word I'm looking for?
Reincarnation?
Thank you. The reincarnation aspect of the character. Again, you can do anything.
Yeah.
Firestorm. I think Firestorm would have a cool. I mean, the JSA. There's so much to this because, like, how do you do the JSA if Wonder Woman is the first superhero to exist in this universe? Not the first to exist, but you know what I mean. Like, she's the first one to be known.
Right. We don't know the history of this world either.
But I think I think the editors said at New York Comic Con that, like, Wonder Woman is the first superhero that the world has ever seen.
Right. Well, I mean, like, in a sense, and maybe I was just having a conversation in my head, but World War II, did it exist? Did it not? Like, we don't know. Yeah. In Ultimate Marvel, the new Ultimate Marvel, they have said it's an alternate history. Like, the ideas of, like, did World War II happen? I think yes, but it happened in different ways. And since then, they've been, like, changing the timeline.
Yeah. I would love to see an absolute book that is focused on a villain.
What's Absolute Lex look like, or any of those other lesser known than that? Yeah.
I
mean, there's so many ways to go with this.
Yeah.
I was gonna say it as a joke, but then my mind started working, and I don't mean this as a joke anymore. Detective Chimp.
Yeah. No, I'm with you.
Love that guy.
Give him Caesar's story from Planet of the Apes. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you can make him a product of these corporations.
Shoot, I mean, there are so many ones that, like, it just is sitting here now, like, thinking, like, oh, who would I like to see in this universe? And you say Detective Chimp, I think, like, Phantom Stranger,
Spectre.
But you got to think about the issues at play, right? Like, what are the issues that these would?
Yeah, I mean,
what can we use them for?
Sure. I mean, there are so many. There's an infinite number of ways to go with them because there is nothing established yet except for what's in these 3 books so far.
Yeah, it all feels very very open to new ideas and interpretations.
Honestly, another one that, like, seems obvious that we, I was trying to go for, like, smaller ones, but an obvious one, Green Arrow.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Especially in this very class conscious universe.
I feel like they would twist him. They would make him bad.
Yeah.
I feel, you know what I mean? Like, I feel like in this universe, because Joker has money, right? Batman does not. I feel like Oliver would be bad.
Yeah, I'd be curious to see what they would do with that.
Yeah, I mean, you could do anything. The question is why, and, like, the question isn't how, because you could write whatever you want. The question is why.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. What are you adding to the universe by creating this character?
Right.
I'm with you.
I think that's the difference between their philosophy and then, like, Marvel, their 2000s Ultimate Marvel philosophy, which is introduce all the characters we can just so we see the fun of, like, reinventing all these heroes. In this, I don't think they're going that route. I think they
feel, like, very deliberate with how they're pacing this out.
We're not introducing the whole pantheon of characters because there's no point.
Well, and not even that. Like, if you didn't know these other books existed, like, there's not really any hints of a larger shared universe in a serious way.
Right. Not
you
yet,
know,
at least, right?
which to me is why I'm like, I think this shows the success of these first 3 issues. I'm excited for the team up. Like, we know it's going to happen. We know there's going to be something.
Yeah.
So
I'm
I'm
happy
very
if they
excited
never
to see
team
it.
up.
Yeah.
I am too.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah.
I'm fine with it.
I think that they've created such interesting characters that I'd be curious to see how their dynamics are different than they are in the Prime universe. You know, I like them a lot individually. That I'm like, oh, I'm excited and curious to see what it's going to be like when these people bounce off each other
Yeah.
and how that all plays out in different ways than what we're used to. So we'll see. We'll see.
I want to thank you guys so much for coming on the show and taking time out of your night to be here to talk about Absolute DC and, you know, past, present, and future and everything. Before we get going though, Brian, where can we find you? What do you got coming up? Anything you want to plug?
Yeah, you can find me on TikTok under the name Captain Comic Rex. I've started putting longer videos on YouTube, but I post them on TikTok as well. But you can also find me on YouTube Captain Comic Rex, talking about my sort of journey in using comics in education. I teach a class on comics at my school. I'm currently in the process of hopefully developing a curriculum for another comics-based class, and kind of talking about lessons that I use, and just trying to give people out on the internet ideas of ways they could potentially use comics in their classes. So kind of adjacent to that, now more than ever, make sure you support your public schools, support your local libraries, go to those town halls, go to those Board of Ed meetings, go to those library board meetings, and make sure you make that support for those institutions known. And it's needed now more than ever.
Yeah. Drew, what do you got? Where can we find you?
What do I got? Okay. You find me on the internet, Drew X Deficit. I'm gonna be we'll try to do some more. Try to post videos on TikTok more consistently. I've been taking a break over the last couple years of just like not necessarily doing something every day, but I'm gonna get more into it. I got December 4th, the DC holiday special titled Batman Smells Robin Laid an Egg comes out. I have a story in that book.
What? Congrats. That's so cool.
Hey, thanks. So you can
I'll
get that.
believe it when I see it.
You know what? Tessa is a nerd, has read it. I don't know how. I have no idea how. She must know somebody, but you know, she knows lots of people actually in the industry. But she texted me the other day and said this is really good, and I said thanks.
Can you tell us anything about it? Like, who's in it? Like the character?
I don't think that I can.
Okay.
I don't think I can. I don't know that I can't.
I will wait until December.
But I don't know.
No, I understand.
I open it and I see Absolute Detective Chimp. What?
Yeah, and you know, I got new music out. I got a band called Good Grief, kind of a fast emo band. And I got a band. I got a heavier band, a hardcore band called Like Heaven. We got our first show on Wednesday, November 13th. It's in Springfield, Illinois. So if you're in the Midwest, if you're in Illinois, you can come to that. Hopefully we'll have some, I don't know when music's going to be done for that, but you know, we recorded a whole 7-song record. All of these songs are named after members of the Endless from the Sandman comics.
Okay.
So you know, when you record it and then some stuff starts coming out about the creator.
Oh no.
What do you do?
Yeah, no. I understand. It's okay. That's not your fault.
Yeah. But yeah, that's what I got going on. I think I'm gonna start maybe working on some indie comics. So that's
right.
what I'm working on.
Exciting.
I sent an elevator pitch to a comic artist who I really like. And he told me when I'm done with the book I'm working on now, we're going to talk about it. So
okay.
Exciting. Right. Very cool. Very cool.
The definitive Inspector Monkey.
There we go. Yeah.
Just what? You stole my ideas for both. Anyway, for anyone out there who wants to follow me personally, you can follow me like on Instagram or Facebook or whatever. At this is Dimithri. This is Dimithri. But if you're interested in the Keeg social media is the Keeg Show on TikTok and Instagram. Those are our two biggest ones. We're also on Threads and Facebook and whatnot at the Keeg Show / the Keeg Show. Pretty much everywhere on social media at the Keeg Show / the Keeg Show, including patreon.com / the Keeg Show. Now, if you want to find a comic shop near you, go to comicsshoplocator.com. Find a comic shop near you. Get these books, Absolute Batman, Absolute Superman, Absolute Wonder Woman, from your local comic shop. Support your local comic shops. And eventually, I'm sure they'll be out in trades, and eventually those trades will probably make its way to your local public library. Support your local public libraries, because those libraries are out there doing great services for the community. So support your local public libraries. Support your local communities. That's pretty much it. This is the Keeg Talks, where we talk about a different topic every episode of the Keeg Talks, but we also do other shows like our Thursday night comic talk show. If you're interested in comics and trying to keep up with everything, we read them all in a 24-hour span and we talk about it all. So that's something to look forward to. That is pretty much it. If you're watching us live, you're watching us on twitch.tv / the Keeg Show or youtube.com / the Keeg Show, or listen to the podcast wherever you get your podcast from. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Audible, Amazon Music, SoundCloud, whatever. We're all over the place. Either way, thank you guys so much for coming on. Brian, Drew, you guys are always great to have on the show. And if you guys are out there listening, like, comment, subscribe, follow, write a review. Do your thing, show your support however you can. Doesn't cost you anything to just write a review. So anyway, that's pretty much it. Thank you guys so much for coming on. Thank you guys much for watching. Once again, I'm your host, Dimithri Perera, and this has been the Keeg Talks Absolute DC. Say bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.